formal presentation, but due to technical difficulties, it'll be an informal presentation, as we don't have any electric. So to begin with, the idea of this brief talk, and this is a brief talk, my workshops normally last hours, and have loads of practical elements, but obviously we're not going to be able to do that in this short space of time. So the purpose of this talk is about connecting with nature spirits in all their forms, and it's about go through a few of the types of spirits that you may encounter or you may know about or you may have worked with, and give some of my experiences and how I find I connect with them, and sometimes this may help others to do so. I'm a traditional witch, folk magic practitioner, and I've been all my life. I've been running groups and covens for 35 years plus, and I've been running workshops to the public for about 20 years. And one of the more popular things I do, even though this is South London, is for many years I've been running open fairy walks. So my area of South London that I grew up in is blessed with some good parks, some ancient woodlands. So if you don't, it's around the Dulwich area. So we have Sydenham Woods, Dulwich Woods, we have a place called One Tree Hill, which is an ancient site, been used for many years. Peckham Rye Park, etc. And I've been doing primarily, not always, but over the years I've done fairy walks in these local areas. And these are walks where I'll take a group of 10 to usually never more than 20 people into these areas at evening, at night, and I will guarantee that nearly everybody there will either see, touch a nature spirit, a fairy, or similar. And as I say, I've been doing those for 20 years, very successfully, and it's invitation only because it's, well, the last couple I did were public, but because so many people, you know, when I started doing publicly, you allow 16 people, and you get 100 people wanting to turn up. So it was and although I've got a good relationship with my local nature spirits, more than 16, maximum 20 is too much. They just bugger off if there's too many people. So, as I say, I have a formal talk all planned out, but that's not quite happening. So, really, what first thing I would do is say, who's seen a nature spirit or fairy or localised gods? No? Yes?
I think I saw something at the corner of your eye.
Yeah, quite often it's...
I'm from Hertfordshire.
You're from?
Hertfordshire.
Oh right, yeah, Hertfordshire's got
And
some good...
we've got a big place called Ashridge, which is
yeah.
also lots of the Chiltern areas and all
Yeah.
that. And I was just walking around and I kept seeing something at the corner of my eye.
Yeah.
First of all, I thought it was an animal, so I realised it was much too small.
Yeah.
And it was just, every time I tried to look at it, it would disappear. But if I could always see it on the periphery.
Okay,
So
that's good. Hertfordshire's got some good nature spirit stuff. I've done work out there with groups of people.
Yeah.
In fact, I use that because you're from Hertfordshire. I have a friend who lives in Hertfordshire, just outside Hertford itself, and she, at that time, was a new boyfriend. Was a mechanical engineering designer, so like very in his head. And what she said was, Trevor, let's take me and Paul on one of your walks, go in the local woods. So I did. Can't remember the name of the woods. There's a place where there's lots of like an old Victorian arboretum. I don't know if you know it. Anyway, there's woods there, managed woods. So I took them there, and I was like searching around. And normally, what I do when I enter an area is, as soon as I approach the woods, I start speaking in my head, obviously, because nature spirits don't speak the Queen's English, and neither do I. And I start communicating. I start sort of sending out a signal. Is anybody there? Is anybody willing to communicate with us? And usually I get a sense once I enter the woods whether this is going to be a successful encounter. So approaching through the woods for a little while, and then I notice down a hill, just by some bushes, there's a nature spirit. Fairly decent size, about so big. Yeah, kind of. The best way to describe this one was he looked a bit like a gnome type character. Obviously not Wisdom of the Gnomes or the Garden Gnome, but a gnome type character. So what I did was I went up to him first and says, "Do you mind interacting with the humans?" And he was okay. And then, because I said, "Do you mind staying where you are, if I bring them down to meet you?" And so I brought my friend who knew me, so she went, and then she could sense him. And then I took her back, then took a new partner down, and then I said, "Right, he's given you permission to put your hand near him." So this chap who literally has no belief in anything spiritual whatsoever, put his hand towards him, and then just as he was getting there, he was getting too close. So I said stop, and he just did that. So what the creature did, the gnome did, was he stepped back. And as he stepped back, the bush he was standing against lifted up. And so this guy, who's like an engineer, going, "Okay, what's happening?" So I said, "Go back." And then I kind of went to the gnome, "Can you do it again?" And so he brought back, and again, as the gnome moved back, with this guy couldn't see, completely invisible to the other people, the bush went back up again. And so I said, "That's enough now. He's not, he's not performing for you." So as I moved away, thanked the gnome, moved away, and this guy, mechanical engineer, very scientific-minded person, he said, "I could vaguely feel something." I said, "Yes, because you was touching it." He says, "Bugger me, Trevor, how the hell is that happening? Because there's no way me moving my hand like 2 foot away from a bush is going to make it move up like this." I said, "That's because the elemental creatures, the gnomes, the etc., they can interact physically with things, whereas we can sometimes encounter them. We can see them, we can physically encounter them. Sometimes we can see them as human-sized figures. I'll speak more about that. But they have a physical interaction with the world around them. It's just we don't always see it, or not everybody is able to see it. So this was proof to my friend's husband that there was something more than the scientific. And he's like, over the weekend, it was like, you kept badgering me about questions about how do you interact with them. And I say, the thing is, nature spirits are all around you. And actually, weirdly, in some aspects, if you're in a city or a town, and there's a natural area, you're actually more likely to find a nature spirit, because they're condensed into a smaller area. So as the land was developed, as the cities were developed, it's made the nature spirits congregate in the existing natural world, because nature spirits need the natural environment. And although they feed very differently to us, I mean, they sometimes will consume things that you put out, which is why doing offerings, like just before I went round and put seeds all the way round, and as an offering to the woodland spirits, to the nature spirits. Always do some sort of offering when you're interacting with nature spirits, but it has to always be something natural. Preferably, if you can, collect things from the place that you're visiting. I mean, as today, I just used some seeds which I bought from the local shop because I didn't know what this environment. I've not been to here before, so I don't know this environment. As yesterday, I was doing a talk on herbs and had the same problem, no electric, so I had to quickly run around and collect some herbs to use and use as my improvised tool. So collect offerings and try and make them something that's natural, that can be broken down naturally, and is, you don't want to be planting seeds like budgie seed, because you could have all sorts of unnatural plants that would interfere with the natural fauna. And that's obviously not good environmentally, but it's also not what the nature spirits want. They want a natural connection from you, a natural exchange of energy. And that's so if you want to invite nature spirits into your realms or work with them, it is about energy exchange. Yeah? Ideally, offerings should be something like the natural, apples, something that's natural, nuts, ideally stuff that you've gathered and brought together. And if the nature spirits don't absorb the energy, then obviously animals around will. And sometimes the nature spirits and the animals around are one and the same thing. Yeah? So sometimes, like you say, you wasn't sure if it was an animal or not. Sometimes a nature spirit will take the form of an animal. So the most popular one, as lots of people are probably aware of, is robins. Robins are often associated as being connected with spirit. A lost soul, somebody who's passed on, will connect with you as a robin. Yeah? This is a popular tradition. The way you tell if it's more than just a robin is by its behaviour. Yeah? See, an acquisitive robin, if it's not something you're feeding every day, they will come near you. And there's a reason why robins, or anything called robin, is associated with a willingness to come and interact with people, yeah, from the wild. So Robin Goodfellow is another example. Herb Robert is a herb that always grows around people. There's things that have that connection with the name Robin Robert as being this boundary between the energetic world, the spirit world, and the human world. So just if anybody's called Robin or Robert, you're kind of automatically by your name interconnected with the spirit world, so to speak. So going back to our animal visits, so the robin is sometimes the form that a nature spirit might take. The way you tell is by behaviour. If it's not something that you're actively feeding or normally sitting with, and this wild robin in the woods, whatever, keeps following you, or will sit down and have a chat with you, like you'll sit down here, come there and start chatting away to you, then that probably isn't a bird, it's probably a nature spirit trying to communicate. Yeah? And then if this has happened in a particular place, then this is a good place to go back. Yeah? So you go back to this place where you're having this magical encounter with a bird. Now what you might find, after a period of time, if you leave some offerings, if you're quiet, not being like intrusive, not going, oh, what does this mean? What's that mean? If after a period of time you do this time and again with a robin, you might find that the next time you see this robin, it's no longer a robin. You might see that's a nature spirit that you can see or maybe feel. Another example, this is a name in a different place. On my fairy walk, I take people through the foots, and one of the guaranteed things I always take them to is there's a bench, a little very simple bench, wooden bench, been there for a very long time. And I know if I've called ahead and asked him to appear to do it, he will sit on this bench. And people are not, clairvoyant, won't see him, but he's quite willing to do this little thing where I get the bench and I get two people to sit either end, and then I go, just gently put your hand round there and then stop, just till you feel a little bit of resistance. You feel a little bit of resistance. And then I get them to come up, and I get another two people to do the same, and then get up, and then do some more people to do the same. And after a bit, I'll say to them, so what did you all feel? And then they will say, oh, there's like a load of air. And he's a known like appearance, but he's about seated, so he's about this high to me. And he's just like very, very hairy. He's like covered in hair. And so when people do this, what they feel is the hair. And they can feel like they're brushing against some hair. And they all come up with the same answer. And then they go, oh, what was that? And then I tell them what they've just experienced. So this robin may appear, then disappear after a period of time. And then you may find that you've got a spirit there next to you, no longer the robin. And this spirit may be something you might be able to see or feel, but don't try and feel them until you have permission or you know that's going to happen. But you'll get a sense. And as I say, generally people, unless you're on very familiar terms, won't see something like, you won't see like your person you're sitting next to. You'll see maybe a bit of light, a bit of mist, or a bit of dysphasia in the things, like in the road, the reflections, the mirages in the road, where you get that change. You might see something like that, but it'll be there next to you. Or like over there, there's something standing over there at the moment. And over there, there's something just on the border of those trees, because sometimes they inquire and they get a bit interested when we do talking stuff in the woods. So you might see this dysphagia. It's almost like a mirage going on. And that would be your first indication that you're starting to see stuff. Now, just talked about gnomes. And I say gnomes are usually woodland, cave spirits. But this, it's like I'm in Peckham, but I could be living in Scotland, so it doesn't mean I'm Scottish. The entities have slightly different forms in slightly different areas. And so any terms we use are quite broad. So for instance, fairies. Do we think fairies are Tinkerbell? No. The sort of Tinkerbell side stuff is more like plant divas. They're more like closest to what you call a Tinkerbell looking thing, would be a plant diva. And they're not, I'm not going to say not intelligent, but they're not. They're very much working with nature they're very much working with the plant energies and stuff like that. They're not like a true fairy, which is much more of a human looking spirit and tends to take, it's like almost a cross between, fairies generally, my encounter, and this is a personal experience, is they're more like a cross between in Britain, like the elves. If you think of the elves out of Lord of the Rings, whatever, in my experience, elves are usually about this size, very human looking, very intelligent. To be honest, in my experience, a bit snobbish. They kind of look down on humans because we're quite inferior, which is true. They live for a few thousand years. We live for 70, 80 if we're doing well. So we're to them as like they don't interact generally that much with us because we're like very small children. It's like we don't bother too much with the small children because they don't really understand what we're talking about. It's that kind of mentality. Whereas the fae, the true fairies, are more keen. They will interact